Good afternoon, everyone. Excuse me, my name is Heather Evans, and I'm the Managing Director of the Community Living Ontario Foundation, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on ransomware and cyber attacks. We'd like to extend our thanks to our presenter today, Kelly McKinney from McDougall Insurance and Financial, a strategic partner with Community Living Ontario in both the commercial and directors insurance category and the home and auto insurance category as well. Kelly and McDougall Insurance are longtime supporters of our organization and our work, and many of you may have met Kelly at our conferences in previous years or saw him in the video with Buster the dog at our virtual conference this year. McDougall Insurance, along with Frank Cowan Insurance, also provided a very generous corporate donation earlier this year as well to support our work. We look forward to our continued partnership in this presentation today. But before we start, just a few housekeeping items to run through. All attendee microphones are muted, but we encourage everyone to ask questions through the question panel, and we will leave time at the end to go through some of those questions. The webinar will be made available to everyone attending shortly after we finish up. The recording will be provided. And without further ado, I'll hand things over to Kelly to kick things off.
Great. Thank you, Heather, and welcome everyone. I have a presentation of approximately 45 minutes, and then I've left time for questions at the end. And Heather, just checking, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So the presentation today is on cyber insurance, which is in a not very exciting industry. It is the most exciting thing in a long time. And I'm going to go through and just talk about what's happening, a little bit of background, a little bit of history of insurance, and then give people some tips on what they can do to protect themselves and their organizations. And normally, if we're presenting live and we're all in the room together, I'd say interrupt for questions, but I think the easiest way with the technology is to wait till the end. So if you can write them down, I may answer them throughout the presentation, or at the end, there's lots of time for questions, and we can go through them then. The picture on the cover is just a cool picture. I'll explain a little bit of background, but this is from GoPro, and I did a presentation last week for GoPro as part of a course I'm doing. So I'll just give you a little bit of background. My name is Kelly McKinney, and I'm an insurance broker, and I have been for 15 years. I live in Belleville, Ontario. Actually, I live in Prince Edward County, but work in Belleville, Ontario. And I'm a generalist. Because of where I live, it's a small town. If I wanted to specialize, say, in transportation or in one specific thing, I'd have to travel a ton, like Toronto, Ottawa, and I like, living in Belleville and having clients here. So I'm sort of a generalist. However, I started taking a course this year in cyber insurance through Chubb Insurance and Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And actually part of the course it's an 8-month-long course. Part of it was a week in Pittsburgh, a week in Arizona, and a week in Pittsburgh again throughout the 8 months. Unfortunately, it's all virtual this year. But through that, I've learned a ton. I'm not an expert yet, but in another 3 months, I think I'll be comfortable calling myself an expert in cyber insurance. And background, you can see my kids. I got 4 kids, and they're all grown up. Youngest is 21, but that's who I am. The picture on the slide, if you're at the Community Living Conference this year, that was all virtual. I was on a video with Buster, not my dog, but my friend's dog, who was in the studio at the time we were filming it, and I thought this is really boring. I should get a dog involved. So that's Buster the dog. McDougall Insurance, we're an insurance broker, so that's different from an insurance company. And just for the distinction, insurance companies are large organizations that offer insurance and pay claims, but they often do it through brokers who are in communities and know people, and they're the go-between. So our job as an insurance broker is to connect different clients with the best insurance companies that fit for them. And in the community living space, for example, there's only 2 or 3 companies that really do it well, that understand directors and officers coverage, that understand abuse coverage, errors and omissions. And so we, in that way, we specialize with a few companies that really get it. And McDougall Insurance, just for background, we have 39 offices all over, mostly Eastern Ontario, but now Sudbury and North Bay. And we're in a lot of the communities, like all the towns that we're in, all small towns, mostly, there's typically a community living organization there. So we feel like a real connection with community living because we sort of get, we live in the communities and we get what you do. And then a little bit about cyber. Cyber is the newest, hottest thing in insurance, as I mentioned, and I'm working my way to become an expert. And the world needs cyber insurance now because of the way, we're so all using computers in everything we do. And so I'll get into a lot of detail about cyber specifically, but we sent out a webinar and asked 3 questions, 3 sort of poll questions. So the first one, do you store any personal data for your customers or your staff? Bit of a funny question because everybody does this. So the responses, 39 said yes, no was 11. So I want to challenge a little people in the no, and then not applicable. Maybe they're individuals that answered the response and said, hey, I don't store data at all. But the reason I asked this question is because almost every organization, and maybe store was the confusing part, but every company has information, every organization on their staff. You have, for example, their name, their address, their bank information. You may have their social insurance number. For your customers and clients, you probably have all that information, maybe their health card information as well. And what organizations do, like for example, our company, for a long time we paid people by check, but now we're bigger, so we do it through ADP, which is I think the largest organization that does direct deposits to people's bank account. So often, you can think, oh, we don't have that information on our staff. ADP has it, but the catch is for all the organizations and ours is that if we have that data, we're responsible for it. So we may have contracted ADP to pay our people, do a biweekly pay every 2 weeks. We give them all the information to do that. But if ADP had a breach and some kind of cyber incident where they were attacked, it actually can come back to, McDougall Insurance or one of your organizations because you're responsible for the data no matter how you choose to manage it. So it's an important factor. And I think, all organizations use computers these days. So this is a way of asking the question to get people to realize that everybody has this data. So I sense there's some questions out there based on this, but save them for the end and we'll come back to them. The next question, do you understand what your mission critical information is? And so 35 said yes, 14 no, 10 not applicable. The reason I asked this question is every organization needs to understand, what's the most important information that you need to run the organization. So, for our organization, for a lot of the companies that we work with, the telephone is actually a crucial part of our business. A majority of our clients, some come in, some connect through us email, but a lot, calls on the telephone. So a telephone system is essential to our company and it's part of our critical information. So it really, the question is just to think about, and it's the start of the process to help people protect themselves from cyber attacks is, what do you need to run your organization? What are the most critical things? And what do you need to do to protect them? So the very beginning of the cyber process, the application process is really, do you have an inventory of all of your critical equipment? So really it's computers, laptops, telephone systems. And some organizations, I know some are small and some don't have the resources or feel they have the resources to do it, but it's really the first step. So if you don't have an inventory of all your computers, say, and all your hardware, then it's impossible to protect them. That's the first point is you need to understand what you have. And then the next stage is really the software, all the software you have. You need to understand what that is so you can protect yourself from cyber attacks. And I'll get into more detail, but that was the question. That was why we asked it. So can you explain social engineering? And the reason I didn't say, do you know what social engineering is because many of you know there's a huge difference between do you know what it is and actually can you explain it to someone else? So often I think I understand something, and then if I think about, okay, can I explain what this is to someone else? I think, oh, no, I can't. I better, make sure I understand it. So 10 people said yes, 49 said no. Social engineering is when someone sends one of your staff members an email and says, maybe they pretend to be the CEO or executive director and they say, hey, Cindy, my banking information's changed. Can you update my banking information and, send my payroll through? Or can you send us, iTunes cards for, and do it quickly? And so they prey on human frailty, human emotions, lack of understanding maybe on what the potential pitfalls are, but that's what social engineering is. And the reason I brought it up is because it gets into a very complicated part of cyber insurance, which is annoying because you want to understand the stuff, you want to make sure it's in its simplest forms, but social engineering is a type of fraud that is covered under some cyber policies, but other cyber policies don't cover it. They actually cover it in a crime policy, which is part of your property package. So there's some real subtleties in there, but that's what it is. And it's in the top 3 ways that cyber criminals get money from companies. So it's something absolutely to be aware about. I would suggest you do training for your employees to warn them about these things. Often you'll get an email, it looks like it might come from the executive director, it has their name on it, but if you hover your mouse over the name, you can see it's a long email address. It's got nothing to do with your organization or your executive director. They've just faked the name on the that pops up, so it looks like it's the executive director. Anyway, lots of resources we can recommend at the end and details, but that's what it is, and that's why it's a concern, because it's such a prevalent factor for cyber criminals to extract money from people. So bonus question, I didn't put this in the 3, but one more question. Are you familiar with the recent legislation changes and your requirements to notify customers and employees? So when I meet with organizations and ask them about their knowledge of cyber and what they're doing, this is a question I ask, and it's a hard one because November 1st, 2018, which now seems like ages ago because it's pre-COVID, there were changes to the Protection and Electronic Documents Act. So this is federal government of Canada, and they made some changes to say, this is really serious. If there's a breach of some kind, we want you to notify your customers that it happened, and we want you to notify your staff that it happened. So it lays out some really specific rules on what you must do. So I laid them out there, the 3 things that sort of the highlights. There's many rules as part of it, but it also comes with some hefty fines. So $100,000 is what the government can fine you if you don't notify your customers or staff properly. So the government's just saying, hey, we take this very seriously. We want you to take it seriously. And if you don't, especially, I don't think they want to penalize people, but they want to say, hey, this is important and customers' information is important. So take it seriously. Now, insurance policy, cyber insurance policies do cover regulatory fines like this, and I can get into a bit more detail later. So I want to give you a brief history of insurance, and I'll be brief because I know it's not the most fascinating topic to a lot of people. The very beginning, this is like 6,000 years ago, there was something called bottomry, which is a funny name. But the idea is loans were granted to merchants with the provision that if the shipment was lost at sea, the loan did not have to be repaid. So it was a combination of a way to finance merchant boats, but also insurance. So they said, we'll give you money, and we understand if the ship is lost, we won't charge you for the money back. We won't expect that money back. So it's sort of a generous way to do it. And this was, ancient times. So it got, things changed over years. That system existed for a couple thousand years. In the 1500s in England, so Lloyd's of London was one of the first companies to do it. What they said, it was a little more complicated, but they said, imagine there's a bunch of, and this is a little bit of history, a little bit sort of my brain imagining things, but a ship gets lost at sea and someone comes back and says, okay, that was a drag. We lost our ship, we lost, all our cargo, we lost our sailors, we lost our captain, we lost the boat itself. What should we do? So they organized themselves and said, let's share in this risk a little bit. So, there's 10 of us that have boats going to America. So let's put some money together. So if one of our ships is lost, the other ones can pay for it. So they all agreed and said, okay, that's a good idea. Let's do that. That's simple. And then ship was lost. They all paid the person that lost the boat. Fair enough. But then at some point there was a mutiny and the boat was lost, but it wasn't lost to a storm. So the owner of the boat came back to this group and said, hey, I lost my boat. I lost the cargo. I lost the ship. I lost everything. And the other people said, hang on a second. We're not intending to cover you for a mutiny. You hired a captain that was not a good manager of sailors, not a good person, and there was a mutiny because he did a lousy job. So there's no way we're going to pay you for that. So what begins at that time is a start of exclusions into insurance policies where they all agreed, or the other 9 out of the 10 agreed, yeah, that wasn't our intention to insure against a mutiny. And so they wrote an exclusion in saying this policy will cover you for, weather events, but we're not intending to cover a mutiny. It's just not what we're interested in. And then over time, you can imagine from say the 1600s to 2020, the resulting changes, like every time there is a claim, there was someone on the other side saying, I think this claim should be paid. And the insurance companies that developed said, no, that wasn't our intention. And I generally believe, I've been in the insurance world for 15 years. I believe insurance companies they do the right thing. They pay claims. And there's about, I don't know the exact number, but 3% or 5% of claims that don't get paid because insurance companies never intended to pay that. So now the sophisticated insurance policy we have today is 100 pages, and it excludes things like mold in a property policy. Why do they do that? Because the insurance companies say, hey, if your spouts aren't draining properly away from your house and you're letting water come into the house, it's going to create mold, and we're not intending to cover that. So we expect you to take care of your house, and we'll insure it, if a tree falls on it unexpectedly or a fire starts, but we're not intending to cover something like mold. There's other exclusions, terrorism, for example. They said, okay, we just can't handle covering terrorism. Some policies have an exclusion for flood. If you're living in a flood zone, they say, okay, we can't afford to pay all the claims for all these houses. But that's where the exclusions came from. And just a little bit of history. First U.S. insurance company, Benjamin Franklin started, sort of cool, 1752. And in Canada, because we're in Canada, the Phoenix Company of London, I would have called it the Phoenix Company of Montreal, but 1804 was the first one. So what's the takeaway? The takeaway is insurance is very complicated. And I know it's frustrating for people because you want it to be simple. You want to understand you pay money for something and you're gonna get something in return. The takeaway is that good lawyers created exclusions and 100 pages, insurance policies that are now 100 pages. One interesting thing is that now that it's so complicated, the role of a broker like McDougall Insurance or like myself comes into play. And I'll give you one example. Prince Edward County is nearby here, and it's wine country, and there's a ton of breweries now and restaurants. But we insured a winery, and they had a claim where when the wine is put into barrels, it gets put into stainless steel barrels, they need someone to keep the oxygen out because it naturally oxidizes, like water just permeates through any kind of any chance to get air will come in and spoil the wine. So they need someone to actually increase the pressure every day. If they check the pressure on it, dial it up or dial it down, and it's a process that's done every day. This wasn't happening at one of our wineries for one reason or another. It was totally human error, but the wine was spoiled by oxygen. So the wine was oxidized. And so they called me and said, Kelly, we need some help here. We've lost, it was about $250,000 in wine. And we screwed up, to be honest, but is there any way the insurance company will pay? So I went through 100 pages of insurance policy and found there was coverage for contamination. It didn't describe exactly what the contamination was, but I knew through my work with the wine industry that oxygen is a contaminant. So I went to the insurance company and said, hey, I think you have to pay this claim because it says here you cover contamination and there's no exclusion for oxygen. So if you can imagine, you're the insurance company, you're intending to cover something, you're taking in money, money you think is fair to pay out for fire, maybe flood in this case, they're covered for flood, trees falling on, and then a broker, like a lawyer could do, says, hey, we think this is covered. So the honest discussion was they said, Kelly, we never intended to cover this. And at the same time, looking after the best interest of my client, I said, yeah, I'm sorry, but because there's no exclusion, you have to pay in my mind. And so they went away for about a week and came back and said, yeah, you're right. We're going to pay this claim because there's no exclusion. So that's how complicated insurance is. And, where a good broker can find a way to get a claim paid. So all policies now have these exclusions I mentioned. One of the exclusions is an exclusion for data. So insurance companies cover, there's a list of things they will cover and won't cover, but one of the things they won't cover is data. So your loss of information, they don't cover, which is why you need a cyber policy. So the first, cyber is a new thing. I talked about, the birth of insurance and how over hundreds of years it's changed and grown. Cyber insurance, the first policy was written by Chubb Insurance in 1998. So you think that's 22 years ago, not a long time in the history of insurance. And then I added a graph just to show, here's the rate, the incident of claims. And this is, it's not zero at 2012, but they just took a point and said, okay, let's compare the growth since 2012. And it's astronomical, 550%. So cyber insurance is new. Cyber claims are not new, and they're on the rise at a dramatic pace. And that's why this is important information for everybody. So a little bit about the cyber threat landscape. So where do claims come from? How does it happen, and what's happening in the world? Well, cyber attacks are on the rise. So they're increasing in frequency, which means the number of claims, and then severity, which means the amount of money that they're getting away with, the amount of insurance companies are paying for it, or in some cases it's not insurable. It's not, insurance company doesn't pay for it, but those costs are increasing. Ransomware is the most prominent threat. And ransomware, I think people know the name now from, just reading the paper. You see, it used to be, there was a Target in the US and Walmart and, some big examples where you go, okay, that's, a multi-million-dollar company, and that's not going to happen to us. But now it's happening across the board, all sizes of organizations, small, medium, and large. And the bad actors target smaller organizations and medium ones because they think they don't have the sophistication to prevent an attack, which is often the case true. And the larger ones they go after because the prize is so large. And why is ransomware important? So ransomware, what they do is they get into your system and they lock it down. So you can't do anything. You don't know who you owe money to, which is important, but maybe not as important as who owes you money. So your clients that owe you money, you don't know who they are, can't get at them, you can't use their system, to do simple stuff. So there's a case just came out about a week ago where someone died in Germany at a hospital. There was a hack of the hospital's information system, and they couldn't get the information they needed to take care of the patient, and the patient died as a result of the cyber attack. So it's terrible stuff. But every company, I would say, every organization, I think all the community living ones that I know, our organization, all of my clients, everybody uses their computers. And so if somebody got in and locked them where you couldn't use them, it's a problem for everybody. So what is ransomware? It's where they say, okay, based on the size of your organization, we want $100,000 to unlock your system. And if you pay us the money, we'll give you the key to unencrypt it. And it's so sophisticated now, and this is crazy, but insurance companies, like the experts that we deal with, we'll contact them and say, okay, there's been a cyber breach, there's ransomware, one of our clients was attacked, the system is locked down. The insurance company, if they have cyber insurance, takes over and says, okay, let's get in their systems, let's see what it is. And they'll say, okay, we know who this cyber criminal is. We're aware of them. We know based on past history, if we pay them the ransomware, they will give us the keys to unencrypt it. In some cases, they'll say, oh, this is someone we don't know, or someone we paid in the past that didn't give us the keys. They just, went away, disappeared. So it's so sophisticated. The police, the insurance companies, the cyber coaches, they know which criminals are attacking which systems. And in some cases, they'll look and say, you know what, these guys aren't even on our radar. We think they're a joke. They're not serious cyber criminals. So let's ignore them. We think we can solve the problem by rebuilding the systems. So it's incredible how sophisticated it is right now. The average cost of a data breach in the US, 8.6 million. This is from a reliable source, but it's such a huge number that, I think it's taking larger companies into consideration. So, I would take that with a grain of salt, but just wanted you to know about it. And then the last point, phishing and social engineering remain the top vectors of attack. So it's the way people are getting into your system is through social engineering, as I mentioned, and phishing attacks. And I'll go into more detail about different kinds of things. So here we go. So this is the actions causing cyber incidents since 2009. It's up to date. It's up to 2020. This is global, all industries, all revenue sizes. So a big mash of stuff. So you might say, Kelly, how about just Canada? How about just charities or healthcare organizations? And how about revenues of something closer to us? It's hard data to get. And at our level, like rural Ontario, Toronto, it's hard to get really good data for this, so I share this with you with the sense that it is global. But human error, 18%. So someone makes a mistake, it's that simple. And this is, your staff. So it's your staff making an error. Hacking is 19%. So, and malware and hacking, I'd sort of put together in terms of, those are external forces. That's how they're getting in. Misuse. Physical is the misplacing of a laptop or a device and just leaving it at a coffee shop or something. That's how people are getting information. And the social one is where that's social engineering, where they're emailing your staff and tricking them. So that's a little background on the actions. The next one is the actors causing the cyber incidents. So I'm just gonna have a check the time actually, 12:27, okay. So external, 58% external, not a big surprise. I think most people think most attacks come from the outside. So bad people are trying to attack, well, it's not all outside. 26% is internal. So that is a mixture of human error, where people make a genuine mistake. Someone does it, sometimes you have insider people who are, it's a disgruntled employee, it's an angry person, maybe they were, they left the organization, but they still have their credentials. So the IT people or whoever's in charge didn't take away their security and they were able to hack the system afterwards. 8% partner. So I'm not sure if you remember the attack, but in Target in the US, huge attack, millions of records lost, millions of data, credit card information. The attack actually originated from a supplier, and it was someone working on their HVAC system. So they were working on the system. They had internet technology on, thermostats, and that's how the hackers got in. So crazy stuff. And the last one's unknown, 8%. So they, despite all their work to figure out, they could not figure out how they got in. So a little bit of jargon. I just want to share some information. This is to help, I don't know if you're at the coffee shop or water cooler or when you're chatting with people. There's a couple of terms I keep hearing, and I just want to throw them out for sort of for education. So the Internet of Things. This is now, I've seen more definitions for it, but for probably 6 months, I kept hearing the name, and I was like, what is this Internet of Things, IoT? And people were throwing it around like everybody knew, and I was like, it's driving me crazy. Like, what is this stuff? So the Internet of Things is simply anything that can be connected to the internet. So examples, there's now smart fridges, smart watches, thermostats that have access to the internet. So you can, in your car on the way home, you can set the thermostat so it's nice and warm when you get home. Kindle, Alexa, all these things connect to the internet, and they're all a potential hazard for everybody. Now 5G is in the news. So 5G is the newest generation of technology for speed. So in some cases, it's 30 times faster than what we have right now, which is mind-blowing. But it means there's going to be an explosion of all these Internet of Things, so all these devices. Now, I don't know why a fridge. I don't know why you need a smart fridge. I haven't figured that one out. Like, do you want to set the temperature when you're at work, so when you go home, your beverages are cold? I don't know. But some things probably don't need to be smart, but they are. And some people love, they press a button when they get up and the coffee maker starts and the lights come on downstairs, all that stuff. So it's, I don't think it's going away. So it's something that we need to think about. The other one I want to share is the cloud. So people talk about the cloud and, oh yeah, our information's on the cloud. And even to some extent, organizations say, oh, we're okay. Our information's on the cloud. We're fine. We don't need to protect it or worry about it because it's on the cloud. The cloud, the best definition I've heard is the cloud is your data on somebody else's computer. And it's really that simple. So you have a contract with someone, could be Apple, could be Amazon, their services, they're huge now into this. So where you say, listen, we don't want to store the data, we can't store the data, or we just decide we want to farm it out, so we're going to give it to Amazon to control. Well, Amazon, it's like the computer on your desktop, they've got more of them and they're bigger, but it's someone else's computer. So it's not, nothing in the cloud, nothing in the sky, it's just someone else's computer. And as I mentioned before, you're responsible to protect that data, even though you've given it to Amazon or Apple or one of those organizations. And I just want to share a resource. I mentioned Chubb a few times. Chubb is really they're, in my mind, the world leader on cyber insurance. And actually, to be honest, of all the insurance companies we deal with, and they don't work in the community living sort of space, unfortunately. They do to some degree, like they do have cyber you can get and D&O, but the whole package of stuff that we like to offer with one organization, they don't do it. But in terms of a well-run company, Great resources. You could, if you take that down, Chubb Cyber Index, you can just Google it. Chubb Cyber Index, first thing comes up is them. Just a ton of resources, some of which I've used today. And if you're interested, there's stuff there that you can use. So cyber claims, I want to talk about, the huge ones are, when I'm selling cyber insurance, like actually even here, McDougall Insurance, 2 years ago, I said, okay, we need cyber insurance. So, one of my partners, the CEO said, I don't get it. Like there's all these claims for Walmart and Target. I don't want to hear about those. Tell me about Canadian claims where someone paid money, like where's the rubber hit the road? But some of these claims are sort of interesting. So I wanted to share, for this context, to share them. So 2014 Sony Pictures attack by North Korea. So I'm not sure if you remember the movie. It was called The Interview. Not a great movie, but Seth Rogen and I forget the other guy's name, but they're bad journalists, and they go to North Korea to do a story on Kim Jong-il, but end up assassinating him. So in advance of the movie coming out, the North Korean government sent information to the US intelligence and said, do not release this movie or bad things will happen. And I don't know if they didn't take it seriously or they did, but couldn't convince Sony not to release it. So they released the movie. Sony was hacked, so they had ransomware. All their systems were locked, for one thing. The hackers deleted all of their, their software, deleted all the information they could. They threatened the executive of Sony. They threatened the movie theaters. So this is where like a cyber attack moves out of, data. It's into like bodily injury and potential for, harm. So it was just a mind-blowing thing. And it wasn't, some hackers, it was called a nation state attack. So, it was the country of North Korea attacking a private enterprise, Sony Pictures, because they were unhappy with what was going on. So I just throw that story. It's not something you need to be worried about necessarily, a nation state attacking your systems, but it's fascinating to me for all the levels that are involved. So there's ransomware, so their systems are, like they were using fax machines for 2 weeks because they couldn't access their information. But then, threatening people, they couldn't talk to their suppliers, they couldn't pay their bills, they couldn't do anything. So just multi-level. Wall Street, I mentioned, I have a friend that works for, can't say who, but a company in New York City, on Wall Street, it's one of the banks. And I said, tell me about what's going on. I'm in small town, but I was like, hey, New York, like, what's happening in New York with cybersecurity? And, do you have, how many staff do you have? His title is risk management, which is often an insurance title. Like, I tell people I'm in risk management because it sounds cooler than saying I'm an insurance broker. But his job at risk management is to look for ways that the bank could be, exploited or lose money somehow. But I said, how many people do you have in cyber security and cyber intelligence? And he said, oh my God, we've got a floor just full of people. I don't know how many. And I said, what do you do to prevent a cyber attack? And he said, everybody on Wall Street, all the banks, all the, insurance institutions, like we all assume that we've been hacked already. And that was so frightening to me that, maybe they're a bigger target than Community Living wherever or McDougall Insurance, but they're, the most sophisticated people assume they've already been attacked. Someone's already been in their system. And one stat to share, the average amount of time to detect a breach in the US and Canada right now is 146 days. So, people, you think about your backups. So you do a backup of your tapes at night, someone takes them home, maybe puts them in a safe. And then you think, okay, we're in good shape because if our system gets shut down today, we're going to lose the information that we put in today, but we can get a backup, from Jerry's safe at home, and we'll plug it in and we'll be fine. Well, in most cases, a lot of the cyber attacks now, like in Sony's case, they've been in for 3 months, in the system, checking out information. They knew, the theaters that the movie was going to, they knew the suppliers, they know everything. So it's a little frightening. I don't want to freak anybody out, but that's just, the level of sophistication. And another claim to mention, it's a cyber claim right now, it's Children's Aid. And I won't mention which one, and this is all in the public domain, so I'm not sharing information that, that people couldn't read the newspaper, because I don't want to share information about, too much about organizations. But the Children's Aid, it's a cyber claim, and what happened was somebody went to their website, so they didn't hack in, they didn't break in through a password, they didn't breach the security, but they went and they took kids' names who are in care with Children's Aid, and they put them on a Facebook page. So, why they would do that, I have no idea. The motivation, it's a bit bizarre to think about the motivation of some of these crimes. Often with cyber, it's money. It's a monetization thing where they're going to take data and sell it. But this children's aid just boggles my mind. But so now there's a class action lawsuit, and I think it's, over $100 million against the children's aid because the allegation is, they didn't do what they needed to do to protect the personal data of the most vulnerable people in society. And so it's a case, I don't know how long it's going to go on for. And so you'd say, okay, is that covered under an insurance policy? No, under most policies, because it's data. So it's got to be covered under a cyber policy because most insurance policies, well, I think all exclude data. And it wasn't a breach. It wasn't a hack. They didn't, break in. They just took information that was publicly available and posted it somewhere else that it wasn't intended to be used. So I just wanted to mention these claims to get your mind thinking about, okay, what data do we have out there that's either mission critical or just important to us because it's, the people that we look after, and then what are we doing to protect it? So if someone can go onto our website and get the names of all of the people we look after, is that an issue? Like, what information are we sharing on social media because we want to, spread the word and do good things? Is there information that we should really think hard about not sharing or protecting? Or I guess the next level would be, do we have permission from the people that we look after to share that information? So this is going to get into some nitty gritty, but this is about cyber. So I'm just going to go through some real nitty gritty. So if you need to zone out or grab a drink, now's a really good time. So typical cyber exposures. So loss of personally identifiable information. So this is name, address, health card number, banking information. That's the kind of stuff they call PII, personal identifiable information. Next one, loss of third-party corporate data. So third party is your clients. So you lose information about your customers or suppliers. The next one, failure to prevent unauthorized access. So you allow someone to hack into your system. Network or security failure, failure to comply with breach notification laws like the PIPE-DA, I mentioned PIPE-DA. Cybercrime, social engineering, ransomware, financial loss, and data loss. So just some typical exposures. Where do the threats come from? I mentioned there, here's a little list. So human error, disgruntled employees, hackers, viruses, vendors, the cloud, system failure. BYOD is bring your own device, where people bring in their own laptops or even phones, because people are working on their phones now for email and whatnot. Lost, stolen USB smartphones, paper files. So some people say, hey, we don't have that stuff on the internet or on the cloud or on our servers. That's paper information. Well, unfortunately, paper is still data, and that data is not covered under a normal insurance policy. It has to be covered under a cyber policy. So if you have a paper file, that someone leaves at Starbucks, or they throw in the recycling bin, and it doesn't get shredded properly or doesn't get recycled, and that information gets out, you're on the hook for that. And that stuff happens. We see that. So how does an insurance policy respond? Insurance is just one way of mitigating this risk, because a lot of it is, IT security and protecting yourself, and I'll get into some suggestions at the end. But if you have an insurance policy, how does it work? What's the coverage and what happens? So first party damages, and I've got a list here, I've got 2 pages of stuff. So, incident response expenses. So a breach happens, what do you do? Call the insurance company, call your broker first, call the insurance company. And what do? So they pay for notification, they pay for a forensic analysis. So your organization may have an IT person that's great, but they're not experts in this, what to do in a breach. And that's why we've got great resources typically through our insurance companies to say, okay, we've had a breach, what do we do? And they'll say, okay, call this number, 800, tell them with Chubb or tell them with Northbridge, whatever the insurance company, Frank Cowan, and they're going to take care of it. And they walk you through the steps. So data restoration, reputation mitigation. So there's a PR aspect to it where, word gets out that the municipality of, I'm trying to think of the latest one that I've reached, but municipalities have been a big target. So word gets out that, that you're not handling your data appropriately, and that hurts. So, it can be a loss of business from it. Legal advice, so you got to talk to lawyers. You have a breach coach, and there's actually breach coaches now. Monitoring, restoring credit and identity theft. So if you have, say, credit cards, banking information, and that gets out there in the world, it's going to cost money to help you restore it. That's your first party coverages, and I'll come back to that later. Business interruption is also a huge piece. So that's one thing we try to figure out with our customers is like, okay, what could happen if your systems get locked down, and what potential do you have for lost income? A lot of organizations have funding through various ministry sources, but is there a potential loss to your revenue that helps you pay your staff, pay the bills, whatnot? Cyber extortion, ransomware, the cyber insurance policy pays ransomware. They don't advertise it, but they pay it in Bitcoin. So usually, and because that's how the bad people want to be paid is untrackable money through Bitcoin, and that's sophisticated. So just quick story: I had a client got hacked, ransomware. Wasn't huge money to him, I guess, but it was $25,000 or $30,000. It's a big organization. He said, what, I'm just going to pay the ransomware. Like, I don't want to deal with this stuff. I need my systems. He had cyber insurance, but didn't know that this would cover it, and that happens. People don't know what's in there. I got to blame myself on that. I didn't tell him enough what was in the policy, but he did have the cyber insurance, and not everybody does. So his son is 25. He said, do you know anything about Bitcoin? He goes, oh, I have a buddy who knows about Bitcoin. So he went through the steps to try to get Bitcoin, which is not easy. You can't go down to CIBC and say, yeah, I need 10,000 in Bitcoin. How do I get that? So he went through several hoops to try to get it. And then at one point, I guess, decided to call me and ask questions. And I said, hey, we've got cyber insurance and we've got a policy that will cover this. And they're experts in Bitcoin. So you don't have to worry about. He was actually physically going to drive to Toronto with cash to get Bitcoin. So long story, don't do that, is my advice. So financial loss, social engineering, where you transfer money, cybercrime of all kinds, regulatory fines, like I mentioned, that's covered. And then third party is, think about your customers or suppliers. That's who this is intended for. So there's all kinds of stuff. I don't want to go into too much detail, but the biggest one that I think about is, how many customers do you have and what information do you have of theirs? So if it's financial information and you get hacked and that information gets out to the world, you have to pay by law for their credit monitoring services. So it's either $150 or $200 right now per year, and you've got to pay, to have it monitored for any suspicious activity. So, if you have one client and they lose their money and you pay $200, that's okay. If you have 10,000 customers or suppliers, that gets into some big money. So that's a factor. So I want to jump in. I need to take a sip of water first, but I want to jump into underwriting cyber insurance. So the questions we ask and insurance companies ask about your organization. So the top three, which I bolded, type of data. So what information do you have? Do you have health cards? Do you have banking information? Those are big ones. Names, addresses, driver's license. You have information that could help someone create a false identity. Who is your client base? Who do you deal with? The most vulnerable, that's a factor. How many records do you have? That's one of the questions. So they want to know, we talking 1,000 people you deal with, or 10,000 or 100,000? So in the cyber application, there's baskets. They'll say, which one do you fit into? And then all these questions are relevant, what your revenues are. And insurance companies ask this for all kinds of insurance, and it's imperfect in my mind in how they rate your risk. But in the simplest form, if you do $100,000 in revenue, or your budget, that's so much risk. And if you do $1 million, that's 10 times the risk in their minds. It's not perfect, and I've argued with insurance companies. Had cases where people just raised the price of what they were doing. Say you're selling hot dogs, for example, and you raise the price from $1 to $2, your revenue is going to go up, but has your risk gone up? No. So anyway, just imperfect little background on insurance. So your policies and procedures, your audits, remote access, how people access your network remotely from home, for example. Everyone's working from home. What firewalls you have, what intrusion detection, encryption, all these things. DRP is a disaster recovery plan. So, in a small organization, I sit and go through these questions. Some of them, people are like, what are you asking me all this stuff for? Like, it's, it's too much. I just want a cyber policy. But it's how they underwrite it. They want to know, I mentioned before, like, how good are they at running their organization? Do they have Do they know what their inventory is? Are they protecting it? Do they have firewalls? And often, an executive director might not be able to answer all these questions. They might have to go to an IT person. Maybe you farm some of it out. You got to go to them to ask. But it's really even where I've been unsuccessful in convincing someone they should buy the cyber insurance because it was too expensive or they didn't see the risk or whatever. That process of going through a cyber application is really helpful, because if you're forward thinking, you want to protect your organization, you go through it and go, yeah, here's a couple areas that we identify by going through this process where we have some exposure and we should think about that. And so it's a healthy exercise to go through it. And afterwards, through Heather, I will send sort of a checklist of things. It's less intimidating than an application, but it's a checklist of things to think about that you would fill in on an application. So I'm getting down near the end here. It's 12:47, perfect, timing's good. So who needs cyber insurance? So a little triangle here with the highest risk at the top and low risk at the bottom. If you're a community living organization, so you could be, I think of it, there's charities are medium risk, but hospitals, healthcare, depending on how you see yourself, you could be higher risk. And then just a breakdown of, on the right is what, what those risks are. So for example, banks, pretty simple, people are going after money. Large customer bases, high fraud, high crime. Retailers are in, where did I see? Yeah, retailers are in the middle basket. So you think retailers, is that a big risk? Well, they're doing credit card payments with POS, point of sale terminals. And that's another question that comes up with customers, because we do retail too in restaurants and hotels and whatnot. And they say, well, we've got a little machine there that takes the money. Like that's not us, that's whoever. That's Maxwell Technologies or whoever it is. Well, again, you're responsible if something happens with Maxwell. So lawyers, as mentioned before, are very good. They will say, okay, you're responsible for that information. You trusted someone that shouldn't have been trusted, or that were lousy at protecting that information. So you're on the hook. And not to nerd out too much, but there's a definition in insurance. If you're found 1% liable, you can end up paying 100% of the claim if the other sources don't have any money. So it happens all the time, and it's confusing and annoying, especially but if organizations, if you have insurance and you have what they think deep pockets, they'll add you to a claim because they know they'll get money from you from the insurance company. And we see it every day. So just a little list, maybe you've got partner or spouse works in something else, to know, where you see them, or maybe you do something on the side that you're involved in, sitting in a board or helping out with someone else. That's the world. Insurance agents, coincidentally or ironically, are down near the bottom, so we're not a big target. But I would say every one of those, like there's a flat pyramid. It's not a pyramid, I guess, if it's flat, but there's a flat line for ransomware. Everybody can be a victim of ransomware, and everybody that uses a computer is affected by it. I think I'm getting down to the end. Yes, okay. I just want to check before I turn it over to Heather. I just want to make sure I've gone through my points. Oh, there's my alarm saying it's 12:50. I should stop talking. I had I forgot one great quote. I don't know if you know Seth Rogen, but he was in the movie The Interview. Very funny guy, was Canadian. I think he's now living in the States, but connection to Canada. He was threatened by the nation state, by North Korea. The actors themselves were threatened. And he sent a tweet out afterwards saying, people don't usually want to kill me until after they pay $12 to see the movie. I thought that was fun. Just want to share that. But that's the end of my presentation. I hope it was useful. I hope you learned something and feel like it's valuable. And Heather, I'll turn it over to you for questions.
Hi, yeah, thanks, Kelly. I don't know if I'm feeling more nervous or more educated, maybe a combination of both, but thanks so much for going through that. I do have a few questions, and I think if we have a couple minutes, let's take advantage of it. More and more people, Kelly, are working from home these days. So do you have any tips? I think you mentioned you might have some that we can send out, but maybe you could clarify that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're lucky. I mentioned I'm in Belleville, Ontario, so we're an essential service. So the insurance, we're actually all in the office, spaced out safely. But I know everybody else in the world is working from home because all our insurance companies are home, the banks, everybody. So that has definitely changed. There's more claims now, more potential for cyber attack because of that. So I actually have a top 10 list through Chubb, my favorite insurance company, on what you can do to protect yourself. So, some really basic stuff, but, number 3, which could be number 1, is use strong passwords. So at home, you're logging into your system, you got a banking password, you've got your password probably for work, you've got your passwords for, I actually have a spreadsheet of passwords because I have so many with all the insurance companies, but, Hydro One, I've got one, all the service I have. And a lot of people,
guilty. I do too.
everyone does, yeah. And it's some people have the same password for everything because it's easier. But if they hack into your Hydro One, or maybe it's something like, you signed up for a free app, boat navigation or something, and you use that same password because it's easy. Well, then they can hack into your bank account and Hydro One and all that stuff. So that's, simple one. And the funny, this morning I was logging into something and it gave me a suggested password. And it was 20 characters long, and it was, a combination of numbers and numerals or numbers and alphabet. And I put it in, and it said password not strong enough. So, stronger it is, the better. Put in exclamation other than numbers and letters, other symbols, and don't write it down and put it onto your computer. So I've got 10 of them that I will email to you, Heather, and you can share with everybody on the call. And they're
perfect.
The other, actually, another.
Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say another buzzword to share is multi-factor authentication.
Authentication, okay.
Which is what is highly recommended by insurance companies. And it's just simply where you have 2 different forms of passwords. So if you think about your bank, when I'm logged into my bank account, my bank app, so I put in a password to get in there. I want to add a B, they have to send me a text and say, just confirm, Kelly, this is you, and you do want to send money to your daughter? And I say, yep, that's still me. So that's multi-factor authentication, highly recommended. It's like 2 different independent sources of confirming. So just to throw it.
Okay, great. We have a great question just came in, so I want you to capture this one. What is the application process like for getting a cyber policy for an organization? So example, length of time involved, average costs, etc. So I think that's probably key on everyone's mind.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I should have touched on it. So there's 2 different kinds of cyber policies. There's one that's called an add-on or endorsement. Typically really simple, 4 or 5 questions, real basic, takes no time at all, which should give you a bit of pause that you got to wonder about what's covered in that. So it often covers just real basic stuff. A standalone policy, which I'd say most organizations need, is more robust, covers the thing you need to cover. It's typically 3 pages, and it's hard, to be honest. Where you go through and there's things where the executive director says, "Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what our firewall is, or our cybersecurity, what we're using for encryption, or things like multi-factor authentication. I've got to that question in the past when I started out, and I was like, yeah, I don't know what that is. What's MFA? So, but it's not. It shouldn't be painful. You just might need an IT person to help out a little bit if you have one, and ask them a couple questions. Then we would take it and send it out to 3 or 4 insurance companies, or your broker, whoever you're working with. 3 or 4 insurance companies, come back, get prices, and then carefully compare the coverages to say, okay, what's covered, what isn't. The cheapest price might not be the best if it doesn't include social engineering fraud, for example. So the process, if you wanted to get cyber insurance, shouldn't take more than a week to get. A week once you have the information, send it out, get prices, and you'd have something in place in a week.
And the range of costs, I mean, you're not going to be able to speak to all of it, but can you give us a sense of some kind of range?
Sure. Yep. I can give you a ballpark. The add-on packages are, $200 to $600 for an endorsement or add-on cyber package. A standalone cyber could be as inexpensive as $800, and then could be, I have one for a municipality that's $24,000. So the more The higher the revenue, the more data, more information, the sensitivity of data, how you're managing your systems, it's all going to be factors in the cost. But, you know, I think most organizations, I'd say, you know, I'd recommend go through the exercise because it's very valuable, get a price, and then decide if it's worthwhile. But based on the number of claims that we're seeing in cyber, you know, it's up 400% over the last year, that there might be other areas where you say, you know, what's our risk of flood? You know, like if we're paying $500 a year or $300 a year for flood insurance, and we could buy, you know, even a basic cyber policy, are we better doing that? So there's a trade-off where I know, you know, you can't afford everything, you can't do all the things you'd want to do. You're nonprofits, budgets haven't changed, you know, there's a lot of considerations, but I would get a price, go through the exercise, because you'd be better for it, and then say, okay, is there a trade-off, or should we just bite the bullet and do this because we've got to protect ourselves?
Okay, great. I think a couple of things. First of all, people may have forgotten already about what social engineering is all about and some of the terms used today. So what would you say is the one takeaway everyone should be thinking of today when they finish the session shortly?
Good question. I would say, you know, because insurance is so complicated, I would find a broker that you trust, and this is not a you know, appeal for call me and I'll help you, but you know, I know people have insurance brokers they deal with for maybe their home and car that get, you know, abuse coverage and directors and officers and all that stuff. I would go to someone you trust and just say, you know, help me out. I think I need cyber insurance because I saw this presentation and it scared the hell out of me. So I think I need it. You know, help me through that process, and let's get a quote and talk about it. So it's, you know, like this is maybe a dumb example, but we were talking about a renovation with my wife, and she was like, you know, we got a quote, and she said, this guy, he's not the best, and he's not the cheapest. And I said, yeah, but we know him, and we like him, and we trust him. Like that is so important to me that just, I don't get renovation stuff and what we have to do. Like, you know, it's got to work and all these other factors. But to me, someone that you can call and say, hey, I've had this cyber attack, you know, I don't know what to do. It's someone you can trust to call. You know, it could be me, could be your existing broker, could be someone else. That is so important to me. That's the one takeaway is insurance is complicated. Find someone you can trust to help you navigate it.
Yeah, it makes good sense. Very good professional advice. So Kelly, I want to thank you for today and remind everyone listening that, you know, you certainly offer other insurance and you're a partner with ours at Community Living Ontario for commercial and directors insurance and the home and auto package. So lots of great stuff happening at Kelly's organization, not just cyber information. So please feel free to connect with him, but we will be sending the recording and the tips Kelly referenced after today's session. But thank you to Kelly and thanks to everyone who joined us. I think that's it. We ended just on time today.
Great. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.